Hey everyone, I'm Russo, and today I'll be sharing with you a tutorial on how to use my Lights plugin for RPG Paper Maker that has been requested quite a few times already. So let's begin. Oh, first things first, you gotta download the plugin. You download the zip folder from the RPG Paper Maker Discord. Then you extract it. You get the default folder and you import it to your project via scripts. Double click the empty space here, import from a local plugin, and select Light. I'm not gonna import it, I'm gonna click cancel because I already have that. So let's start by creating a new map. Can have all the default settings, no problem. We'll start by adding a floor, adding a few trees here as face sprites, a double sprite as well. We can have some barrel here, barrel there. Set the hero starting position here, maybe here, better. And now we can start adding our lights. Set a new map object, graphics to whatever, and go to Structure tab, Plugin, select Light if you have multiple plugins, and go directly to Add Directional Light. Let's start simple. Directional lights are the easiest ones. So no need to do anything else, just add a directional light and we're done. There. See how everything became brighter, but nothing really changed. The light is just in the same general direction and everything is the same except the scene is brighter. Well, that's because what's happening here is I'm adding the directional light at these coordinates, which are the same as the sunlight, the default directional light of the engine. So if I wanted to make something different, then I could set X to 0 and set Z to a value higher than Y. So we'll have a long shadow that doesn't lean to the left or right, just goes north and south. There we go. We have all lights pointing north now. And we have also the default directional light. The scene gets weird if we have both of them, so we are gonna destroy or unload the default directional light here. We could theoretically just disable it here, disabling the sunlight in the map properties, but that's not how it works, because if you disable sunlight, then all map objects are set to not cast or receive any shadows. So the plugin just won't work. Here, now we have only one directional light. And that's how directional lights work. Whoops, here. The default intensity is a half. It must be always between 0 and 1. And these values, if you change, for example, Z to -5, it will project the shadow, it will cast the shadow the other direction. Now all shadows will be pointing south. And there you have it for directional lights. One quick note, notice that the property here is set to 1. That's because each light you create is set to a property. Let's say directional light here. Now this light is stored here as if it was a variable. And if we want to make changes to the light later on, then we go to light and change color. Let's change the color. Set light color, property 1, which means it will change the light at property ID 1 to red. Let's see how it looks. There you go. If you try to change a light to a property which isn't holding a light, then the game will crash. So it's important to always keep the lights organized. Let's start working with point lights now. Add a point light to property 2. And well, let's leave everything in default. Let's change this here because I want to show you something later and just see what this point light does. Here, notice that the point light points in all directions. It will start from this object and point everywhere in a circle. Actually, it's a sphere, not a circle, but anyway. Here we added the light to property number 2. If we don't have property number 2, then nothing will happen, but then we cannot access it later. We'll start with light for the name. And just notice one thing, that if I add property 1 here and I forget to change the property here to 2, if I set it to 1, then I will erase whatever was stored there previously, and the property 1 will now be the point light. See? Now the point light is red and the directional light is the default white. Anyway, let's set it to the right value. And let's go through all the new things. The ID is the most important one, is the ID of the map object that this light will be anchored to. So I'm anchoring it to -1, which means it will stay anchored to this object here, this red-haired little guy. But if I set it to 0, then this point light will follow the hero instead. And here we go. For point lights and spotlights, the XYZ coordinates are offsets, which means they are anchored to a certain map object defined by their ID, and X, Y, and Z are the offset values. So let's say I put 0, 1 to X. Actually, I add 1 to X. It means that the light will be 1 square to the right of the map object it is supposed to be assigned to. Here. If you want to change that to pixel values, then you have to use decimal values. Whoops. Here. This doesn't operate in pixels, but if you want to have half a square, then just go 0.5 here. Notice that unfortunately in RPG Paper Maker it's kind of hard to use decimal values, so what I like to do is select each digit one by one and change their values, which is kind of tedious, but well, what can we do? Here, if I change it to 0.5, then it will be 0.5 squares to my right. Another new property of the point lights compared to the directional lights is the radius. I can set it to a lower value or a higher value. It's always in squares. So if I set it to 3 squares instead of 5, there you go. Also, notice how the point light is flickering now, and that's because the hero model has the pixel offset turned to on. If I turn that to off, then it will stop jumping on the moving animation, and everything will be more linear, let's say. Let's go to Systems, Models, Hero Model, and disable pixel offset just to see how this looks. See? The light is moving linearly now, but the hero doesn't do the little cute jumps that he does usually, which is actually pretty clever for 18 by 18 sprite. I mean 16 by 16 sprites. It's a clever idea. Adds a little... makes them more lively, I guess. Anyway, I'll set that back to on. Systems, Models, Hero, pixel offset. And, well, let's see. Let's go to spotlights now. Add spotlight. We have two new different values, which are angle and distance. Notice that differently from point light, we don't have a radius because it's not a radial light. It points towards a direction. So we have it set to ID -1, which means it will be set to this red hair little guy. 4 squares on top of him, and 0 to other directions, which means north, east, west, and south will be the same as the sky. Color is by default white. Can be set to cyan, for example. And let's leave these two values as they are for now and see how it goes. Oh, there you go. We have a light blue light on top of him, and it's pointing directly downwards because what a spotlight does is it starts from somewhere and it points towards another point in space. So we want to go to set a spotlight target, and we'll set it to another map object to 0. I think I forgot to add a, yeah, I forgot to add a spotlight. So let's set that to 3 and correct the spotlight property here. Set it to 3 as well. And now, supposedly, the spotlight will be following the hero. It is kind of weird because the hero already has a point light on himself. So let's add another object here, set graphics to whatever. And yeah, its ID is 3. So let's set the point light to ID number 3. And there we go. Now the point light will be assigned to the sheep and the spotlight to us. Okay, so the angle is the opening angle. So the higher it is, the larger the shadow will be. So let's set it to 30, and it supposedly will have double the radius now. here, much larger. Also, try not to set it ever to higher than 90 degrees because that's probably going to cause visual errors. Let's set it to 90. It should act somewhat like a directional light now because it's too wide of an opening angle. See, it's just coloring everything, but it's always following the hero. Anyway, let's tweak with the distance now. The distance here is set to 0. Let's turn this back to 20, and distance, when it is set to 0, then it becomes limitless. We probably do not want that, so we're gonna set it to 10 squares. That means that whenever the light target is further away than 10 squares, then the light will fade here. It does still reach the ground nearby because it is set kinda low at 4 squares height. So if we set it to 10 squares height and make the distance 20, then we'll have a better visual result. Yeah, there we go. Well, those are the lights that stay anchored to map objects and cast shadows. So let's talk about the other useless, I guess, lights. I just put them here because they exist in the Three.js API. Let's see. Add hemisphere light to property number 0, which means it won't be added to any property at all. I do not want to handle this light later, so I'll just delete it afterwards. Let's set the color in top to magenta and on the bottom to blue. Well, actually, let's set to red and blue and revert back this color to green to set it apart. Save everything, and now we should be seeing a red light on top of everything. Well, plus the green light of the directional lights where everything is yellow, and a blue light pointing from the bottom to the top. Here, we have a few blue lights on, well, flat objects that are completely horizontal, but this hemisphere light is very situational, so I do not recommend you use them unless you really know what you're doing. I'm gonna just delete that for now and talk about the ambient lights. Well, ambient light is basically the same thing as the screen tone. Let's set it to red. No, it's already red. Let's set it to yellow. Here, with intensity of 1. Let's set that back to red because I like red, and that's it. Red and yellow. So what we have here is a directional light of red color and ambient light of yellow color, which is basically the same thing as changing the change screen tone to red and green, I think, was yellow. I don't really remember. So let's delete that. It's kind of the same thing, but the engine It handles lights in a more different way. They are way brighter. They have a white tone to them. So if you want the absolute value, I recommend you use the plugin. If you want a more, well, a smoother light, then maybe use just the change screen tone. It's basically the same thing, but here it has more lenience, and with the plugin you'll have a better control of what you're doing exactly. So I think that's it for loading lights. Now I'm gonna talk about object, cast, and receive shadows. Let's say you have a vampire, for example, I don't know. Let's set this little guy here to be a vampire. What this will do is it will disable its cast shadows and receive shadows. Set receive shadows to off. Cast shadows means it won't cast any shadows on other surfaces, and receive shadows means it won't receive shadows from other surfaces. Here, the point light in the sheep was 0.5, so I think we need to change it to 1 to what we're going for, and change Z to -1 as well, so it will go to south. Save, and let's see. Oh no, actually it went the wrong direction. It was supposed to Z1. Okay, Z equals 1. Fine. There you go. It won't cast shadows anyway. We need a higher radius. Let's set it to 7. And there you go. Well, wrong property. This one is 3. The radius is supposed to be 7. My bad. Now there we go. See, that's what I mean by receive shadows. The shadow of the sheep is cast on top of our vampire. So when I do that, then it won't receive the shadow of the sheep anymore, and it also won't cast its own shadow. See how the point light is pointing to it, but it is not casting any shadows. Also notice that the point light is moving with our camera because, well, it's a face sprite, so it also moves with the camera. If it was a fixed sprite or 3D object, then it would stay in place. And let's see. Oh yeah, final thing. Let's say you want to load all the lights of your scene in one go, and then just turn them on or off, because that's better optimized for your map. You see, loading lights can cause momentary lag, so it's not good to make them load dynamically. You should load everything on a single map load, and then just enable and disable them at will. Here, let me show you what I mean. I'm gonna delete everything and start over. We'll have this event to here, we're gonna have a light property for point lights and another property for on or off. Let's call it control. And it must be set to switch on. It starts on and we can change it on or off. Oh, in theory, you could also just make another state, state 2, and change lights between state 1 and state 2. But the thing is, the lights are anchored to the object's mesh, which depends on its state. So if you change the object's graphics, then the light will also disappear. So do not do that. It won't work for that, for that plugin. Just keep a single state. I know this may be harder to control, but that's life. And go to structure, add a condition, maybe property number 2, which is control. If it is on, then set it to off and add an else condition. If else, let's go to map, modify property, property number 2 to off. And here we do the same thing. If it's off, set to on, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and add a new plugin, command to light, and enable or disable light, light property number 1 to off. And here we set it back on. There we go. But there's one thing missing. It did not initialize, it did not declare the light here. And we know we cannot just add a point light here, because this would cause lag. So instead, we use this command here, get local lights. We get all the lights that are anchored to this object and place it in properties of IDs starting from 1 onward. So if we had 2 or 3 lights, then it would be properties 1, 2, and 3 to lights 1, 2, and 3. We only have 1 light, so we can place it here. Just remember to keep everything organized, or eventually you have conflicting properties and you can crash your game that way. So let's see, this object's ID is number 2. So let's leave that here. Go to map properties, structure, plugin, light, and add a point light to, can be set to property 0 since map load will not repeat itself. And ID cannot be -1 because the map itself is not a map object. We have to set it to number 2. There we go. Now, as soon as the map loads, we'll have a point light assigned to this object here, and we can set it on and off. This will work for any light. And I think that's it for today. Let me see. You can delete the lights instead of turning them on or off with remove all lights or remove a single light given its property. But keep in mind that if you do that, you will not be able to turn it back on. You are actually deleting it from the map. You would have to load another light to replace it. So I recommend you use it only if you do not want that light anymore. Same goes for remove all lights. You're deleting all the lights. So only use that when you are sure you do not want any more lights in your map. And I think that's it for today. I hope this was enlightening for you all, and well, that's it. Bye.